It's quite natural to think, oh, what have I done wrong? It's me, not the other guy. It's my fault. I'm not good enough. But super important to flip it around and go, right, I am good. I'm amazing. I'm going to get another role and it's
I've
going to be
got
awesome.
transferable skills. If I was employable for this long, I can be employed again.
When there's no more challenge in your role, you're not actually the next year or the following year, you're not getting extra incremental roles, if you like, or opportunity, then that's probably the time to probably have a look.
You take the punt on yourself. Not that it's a punt because you are backing yourself.
So if you think about if your situation is tough financially now, just think about how much worse it's going to be if all of a sudden while you're off work, you now become sick or it becomes a real catastrophe.
Welcome to Where's My Money? One man, $1 million of debt, one podcast to find a way out.
Welcome to part 2 of episode 1 of Where's My Money, season 4. In part 1, you heard from TV presenter and legend Mike McRoberts, as well as a number of Kiwis on the street, talking how to survive when you lose your job. In part 2, we catch up with Matt Buckeridge and Willie Moala from Enable Me, who provide guidance over how to deal with losing your job, as well as recruiter Tim Slyfield, who talks about what makes someone truly employable and why LinkedIn really matters. Just a reminder, this pod isn't here to replace any financial advice. We can't take your own personal circumstances into account. We recommend you seek guidance from a trusted financial advisor, strategist, or coach. Let's go. What's a list of the top 5 actions people need to take if they have just lost their job?
Well, Regan, I reckon the number one tip is it's only natural to be affected losing your job. So it's take a moment to process what's happened. It's not your fault, so don't feel like you're not good enough. Mindset is really important to navigate your way out of the situation.
Yeah,
You've
so
got to
true.
be confident in your ability to bounce back, get another role, and move on. This could be the start of a great opportunity, so sort of flip it on its head.
Yeah, that's
Be
probably
positive.
not mentioned enough, eh? Like you do need to, if you've been in a career for a long time and all of a sudden that's been turned on its head, you totally need to be in the right mind space to pick yourself up because that can hurt, eh?
Yeah, well, it's quite natural to think, oh, what have I done wrong? It's me, not the other guy. It's my fault. I'm not good enough. But super important to flip it around and go, right, I am good. I'm amazing. I'm going to get another role and it's going
I've
to be
got
awesome.
transferable skills. If I was employable for this long, I can be employed again. Like, yeah, totally. Awesome.
Yeah.
Right, what's number 2? Next on the list, let's hit it.
Obviously important to assess your financial position.
Yeah.
So hopefully you've got some savings or an undrawn facility in your overdraft account. Hopefully you've been able to negotiate a redundancy, even if it's not in your contract, try and negotiate that. And then assess how long that money is going to last you. So that'll give you a runway and give you a sort of a timeline on how long you've got before things really get problematic.
Yeah, that's quite a good point, I guess, too. People lose their jobs, but often it's with a bit of a parting farewell cash contribution from the business purely because of that, right, to try and tide you over till you find your next job.
Yeah, and it is an emotional time, so you can use that emotion to your advantage. And even if there isn't, often contracts don't have a massive redundancy clause in them, but often you can negotiate a better send-off.
Okay, interesting. Any tips on that one? Just play your cards and you don't want to get too...
Tears are great.
Okay, good, yeah. Some alligator tears, but not threatening. We don't want to start threatening to take people to court or anything like that, right? Because it could get messy and expensive.
Yeah, that could get messy. Yeah. I probably wouldn't go down that path unless you know what you're doing.
Yeah,
don't take my advice on that one. Yep.
Fair enough. Not financial advice.
That's not financial advice. Yeah.
Number 3.
Review and reduce your expenses. So you need to understand from a cash flow point of view what's going to be coming out of your account.
Yeah.
So if you're planning on taking that trip to Hawaii or upgrading your car, obviously you knock them on the head pretty quick. But things like the coffees that you're buying, you might want to pare that back. So think austerity and just try and preserve that little buffer that you've hopefully got in your financial toolkit.
Do you think if we go back to point 1 with that, is there... I mean, it's probably case by case. You don't want to keep blowing your money on going to the pub or takeaway coffees, but possibly also important to make sure you are looking after yourself. And if And if a coffee a week does help you keep the right frame of mind, or the gym membership or whatever it is, figure out what's important and what's not so important right now, yeah?
Yeah, totally. So gym was obviously very good, but having maybe have one bender if you're pretty upset, but don't make it a regular thing. That's obviously not going to help your cause.
One bender allowed, also not financial advice. Okay, number 4.
Obviously, you've got to update your CV, get onto LinkedIn, tap into all your networks of people, and you've got to hustle and get yourself a job. So that's where that mindset thing is super critical, that you're confident and pick yourself up and off you go and get that new role.
Yeah, it's probably important to keep your CV updated, even if you're not thinking of either going for a new job, or no one's ever planning to lose their job, but always have it updated just in case is what someone taught me, and I've tried to keep it current, I think. But I guess remembering that your new job is finding a job, so you've got to like commit to it, wake up in the morning and treat it like that is your job until you find the next one, right?
Totally. And you may find that you have a few CVs depending on what sort of role you're going for.
Fair enough. And number 5,
just protect your long-term financial goals. So if some levers to pull in terms of freeing up cash flow are things like KiwiSaver holidays. If you've got some mortgage payments that you can see you're going to struggle to make, get in touch with the bank and let them know what's going on. You might be able to negotiate interest only on your mortgage for a while. Mortgage holidays were a thing over COVID, so you might be able to negotiate that.
Yeah.
Obviously, they're not ideal, and they would just be a short-term solution, not a long-term strategy.
Yeah, and not something to rely on. I know we pulled that lever ourselves, and it was a tricky one to pull. There's a lot of paperwork involved, and obviously it has flow-on repercussions for the rest of the loan, right? So it's something not to take lightly.
No.
But it can be very useful in the right situation.
Yeah, I guess communicate with those lenders earlier rather than later, and hopefully you can negotiate, because they don't want to tip you over. They're going to try and make things work.
Yeah. Well, it's in their best interest to keep you on as a customer, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
awesome.
a mortgage sale of a house, for instance, is not a good outcome for the bank generally.
Thanks, Matt. He brought up a very important thing there, which is committing hard to finding a new job, getting the CV polished, and getting yourself re-employed. I thought it would be poignant and kind of interesting to talk to someone who does this professionally. When he's not winning medals in judo or helping others do the same, Tim Slyfield is managing director at Alexander James, a recruitment firm that helps connect the right employers with the right employees. Is LinkedIn all shit? And how can I make myself super employable? Tim's got the answers.
Yeah, look, I think the good news is that it's changed this year. Last year it was horrible.
Right.
Both nationally, Wellington in particular was horrible. And being a recruiter without any roles last year, or fewer roles, and lots of candidates due to restructures, etc., it wasn't great. But I think this year started off really well.
That's good.
January, February, March is positive. Obviously, things like Trump and a few other things like that have affected it a little bit.
Yeah.
But I think it's positive this year. Yeah.
What are you seeing a lot of in the market right now in terms of, skills or trades that there are a lot of floating around? Maybe a lot of people lost their jobs. You mentioned Wellington, so I'm assuming that's government bureaucrats, So outside of that, what is there a lot of currently, and what is there not enough of in terms of skills that people are looking for?
Yeah, look, I think broadly all sectors, all groupings of roles. I mean, we focus in on finance, IT, supply chain procurement, and construction.
Yeah.
All those areas have been affected, and there's lots of people out in the market. The interesting part is that that age group from sort of about 30 through to 45 has been a big exodus offshore.
Right.
So what we're seeing is, yes, there's a lot of people out in the market, but also, when we start picking up again over the next 2 to 3 months, like post-COVID, we're actually going to be in a bit of trouble because
a lot of people have left.
A lot of people have left.
Bit of a brain drain.
Yeah, I'd call it talent shortage, but brain drain.
Yeah.
And so I think I think employers got to be really careful about that and plan out for the future in the long term, opposed to this little blip at the moment.
Yeah, we did the maths with some guests in the last season about whether it's actually worth particularly moving to Australia.
Yep.
And it kind of came down to personal choice, because obviously the cost of living over there might be a little more expensive in the big cities, but in a smaller market it's actually quite cheap to live. Yep. But then your earning potential in Sydney or Melbourne's really big, but your rent is huge, whereas you go to the sunny coast, there's fewer jobs, but it's cheaper. So you've kind of got to weigh it up for yourself. There was no real right or wrong answer whether it's best to move offshore.
There is no right or wrong answer. But I think with some of those bigger markets, bigger companies, bigger opportunity, and we are a small market. So I think that's potentially, in construction, a lot of guys and a lot of candidates have headed over to Sydney, to Melbourne.
Stuff needs to be built everywhere, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
There'll never be a shortage of that.
No.
Are there any smart pivots people can make at the moment? We talk a lot about side hustles in terms of, adding strings to the bow, so to speak. But, maybe this is more of a midlife crisis problem, but you have people have these points in their careers or just in their lives where they go, what am I doing? I need to change. Are there any pivots right now that people could make to maximize their earning potential in terms of, something I could go and learn at night and next year go for a job at it and actually make heaps of money because there's a shortage in that area?
Yeah, look, my personal view is that sometimes people pivot too quickly and actually getting good tenure within their roles, because we see a lot of CVs and we see a lot of gaps and certainly a lot of roles. But when you actually see a profile with good tenure, I think they're hugely marketable in actually developing their career in their current position and actually progressing within their firm.
Is that like more of a loyalty thing, or you're more impressed by someone who's willing to stick it out and really commit to our role versus our company?
Yeah, I don't. It's not necessarily the loyalty piece, but it's. But I think over 3 to 4 years, you really get to know a role. You really get to get to understand it and learn your craft and actually be really good at your craft over that period of time. Whereas a short period of time, 1-2 years, in my view, you're just starting to get into it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Oh, don't look at my CV. I did a lot of ping ponging. I thought I was, I've been trying to climb the ladder, and I've worked at my current workplace for almost a decade, which is pretty good. But lots of roles within the one workplace. Is that a good thing, or?
Yeah. Well, look, there has been a trend over the years that people will move for money, and I don't necessarily agree with that, because if you move for 5-10K, I get it, I understand that it's quite valuable, but actually, in my view, actually sticking it out, you'll get bigger progression either in your current company or actually get valued elsewhere further down the track.
That's an interesting angle then, because I've always been fearful of staying in one job for too long. Yep. Maybe it's because of the industry I work in. For background, I actually work in radio. When I'm not doing the podcast, I'm doing radio stuff. And there's a bit of a fear around a form of traditional media that might be sort of not dying, but, like slowly changing to how we deliver content, and maybe people won't be as as common in the workplace further down the track. Yep. Is there a risk of staying in a job too long where you've specialised yourself into a corner, and you almost become kind of unhireable elsewhere because you've become so specialised? Yeah,
well, that's and when talking about markets as well, like when there's a depressed market, employers are looking for a bit of breadth in a person when they start to look to recruit. In a really hot market, companies are starting to look for more specialisation, and that again is just a cost thing, because they're trying to utilise the people they've got with the money they've got. So you understand that. I think in terms of the overall tenure within a role, it's when you start when there's no more challenge in your role, you're not actually the next year or the following year, you're not getting extra incremental roles, if you like, or opportunity, then that's probably the time to probably have a look. Not because of money, but actually you're not progressing yourself in terms of career.
That's good. You talk about money. That's a good segue. I mean, you work with both employers and potential employees.
Yep.
You're likely paid by the employers to find the employees, right? That's generally how it works.
Yep.
For the employees, when it comes to salary negotiation, what's the best way to play that when you're new? Because, you know, if you've got a bit of tenure, you've got a couple of bargaining chips up your sleeve. If you're new to a business, what's the best way to play that game?
And again, it's probably not asking too soon as well, because actually when you've proved your worth, and actually the roles change from when you first came in to, say, a year and a half, 2 years down. You've bolted on some other responsibilities and achievements, etc.
Yep.
You want to go to the employer and say, hey, look, my role has changed. I have done X, Y, Z on top of my normal role. I just want to have a chat around salary and benefits, etc. So yeah.
Do you think Kiwis are good at that? I don't think they are. But
No, I don't think
that
so.
might just be me.
No, I think you're right. I think that we're pretty not afraid, but we don't want to rock the boat. We want to basically just get on with things. They'd probably, and this is further to your point, they'd probably leave rather than actually have that awkward conversation. So they'll leave for another opportunity.
Why are we so bad at it?
No, I know. But whereas, there's opportunity internally, they should be looking at and should be asking that question.
Yeah.
Looking for career progression, actually asking that question as well. Sitting there going, well, hey, I'd love to be considered for X, Y, Z. I'm a CFO now. I really want to go for that CEO role. Please keep me in mind. So it's that conversation. That
It is not to say that I've gone from CFO to CEO, but it is so satisfying when you take the punt on yourself. Not that it's a punt because you are backing yourself, but when it actually comes through, you have the awkward conversation. Yeah. You get through that sticky kind of, I'm talking about myself and trying to make myself sound good. It's that tall poppy thing.
Yeah,
We
exactly.
don't like promoting ourselves.
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden, if you get that yes back, you're like, oh my God, it's so worth it.
But the employer wants to know about that as well.
Yeah.
They want to know that you want to progress, and they want to have. If you're thinking about salary, then have that chat. It's just how you do it, right?
Yeah.
You don't want to be aggressive. You don't want to be forceful around it. But you certainly want to explain why you think there's potential for a salary increase.
Is it something you offer, like a training session on getting a pay rise?
Oh yeah, look, we not necessarily the pay.
You should.
but
Maybe this is your pivot.
Yeah, we often do give advice to most of our clients, candidates, etc. But also that conversation and around actually asking in terms of what's next for me. We will push our candidates back to the because it's important for them, because often there's opportunity within their current firm. They'll come to us thinking they want X, Y, Z. Have you actually explored with your current boss about the opportunity within your firm?
Yeah.
So and often they do, and it works out well.
Sometimes it's just a little extra bit of perspective, right? To
Yeah.
actually look over there and look at the
Exactly.
other pot of desks and see what's going on.
Bit of the devil you know.
If I were to lose my job today,
Yep.
touch wood, touch every piece of wood there is imaginable, what would you hope that I would come for if you wanted me to be a really sharp candidate for a role?
Yep.
What's going to help me get a job like straight away?
Well, first things first, I suppose you have to temper your expectations in terms of straight away. And depending on where you're at, like there's senior roles that do take longer.
Yeah.
It's
Pretty hard to find a CEO position, right?
And
Yeah.
you might be looking for 12 months. You might be looking for 6 months.
Wow.
That mid-level market is obviously turns around a bit more. But I think the biggest thing for me is the presentation piece. When candidates come in, they can tell their story.
Yeah.
So that storytelling piece is really, really important. CV is obviously critical, but if they can tell a good story about their career, then that's gold.
Would you rather they turned up with no CV but that? I mean, you're going to have a CV.
Yeah, you're
right?
going to need a CV.
Yeah.
But I just think, and further to the training piece, we often do that training piece about telling that story, actually sitting there and it's not necessarily about the detail of the beginning of the career, but you do need to cover it off and then actually work through to the employer is probably more interested in your current role or your previous role.
Yeah.
So you're going to talk a bit more detail in your achievements, etc. But again, that storytelling is critical.
So that's a do. Are there any don'ts? It's stuff you see all the time where you're like, fuck, stop doing that. You're not helping yourself. I mean, I guess you kind of filter it out, but if you could prevent it from turning up on your desk, what would that be?
Do's and don'ts. It's probably the do's, really. It's like, we as recruiters, there's other things you can do as well. So your personal network, your friends, family, etc. There are other ways of looking for a role. It's not just through us.
Yeah.
So
Jump on LinkedIn.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, and actually go and introduce yourself to people. Be bold in the sense that go out and if you want to work in that firm, go and approach the CEO. Go and approach the CFO, sales market.
Appropriately.
Yeah, appropriately, of course. Yeah.
Don't go doorstepping them. Two things that are pretty hot when it comes to jobs. Firstly, finding a job. LinkedIn.
Yep.
Is it worth it? Is it just Facebook? Like what?
No, it is worth it. I think you need to have a LinkedIn presence. You need to have a good profile, nice and crisp, enough information because people like us are going to look at LinkedIn.
So you do use LinkedIn
Yeah,
as a recruiter?
we use it.
Okay.
We search off it. We source off it. We advertise on it as well.
Fair enough. Yep.
So it's critical to have a decent profile.
Is there such thing as posting too much bullshit on LinkedIn though?
Yeah, quite possibly. Yeah. and that's it. It's you want to. People are posting a lot of things. Employers are posting a lot of things. We post a lot of things.
Yep.
We advertise on LinkedIn as well. I think LinkedIn. People complain about LinkedIn. It's turning into a Facebook sometimes, but relevant posts are important.
Yeah. Okay, that's good to know. The second thing is the advent of AI. How's that changing? Firstly, how you do your job. But secondly, are you seeing people look for AI skills abundantly in recruitment at the moment? Yeah,
so in terms of AI for us, it helps us from an administration perspective, proposals, and a lot of that stuff below. It's a tool for us.
Just get rid of some of the grindy stuff so you can focus on people. Yeah.
It's not. I don't think it's going to change recruitment from a person-to-person perspective, but it is a tool, and that's my perspective. In terms of customers, yes, they are looking for it, but they're looking to employ AI people, but I think they haven't quite figured out what the problem is, what the problem they're trying to solve. So we're getting there, and more customers are coming to us.
Feels like people want to get ahead of the curve because they don't quite know what to do yet. So it's kind of a buzzword now, but if they get a few people that are good at AI in a couple of years, they'll be in good stead to really master it, right?
Yeah, it'll be automating.
I say years, it's probably 2 weeks away.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, look, it's moving quick. But the automation of things, and we've talked about it before, yes, it is bringing down staff numbers, and it will do that over time.
Of course, yeah.
But that's probably from the administration piece. So, yeah.
And as we've said, if you're looking for people that can master AI, it is actually creating more jobs in that sense.
Absolutely. Yeah.
We just shouldn't be scared of it, right?
No, I don't think so.
It's not going to take jobs altogether.
No. And look, the evolution of jobs, it's always been there. It's just changing again, and it's probably just changing in a different way. There'll be AI will create other jobs in other areas.
Yeah.
So
until then, we'll just keep creating silly photos out of it. Whether it's redundancy, restructure, or just bad luck, the financial fallout can hit fast and hard. So if we flip to the other side of the equation, aka being prepared for the worst, what can you do before it happens to protect yourself? And if it's already happened, what are your options? To help unpack it, we're joined again by Willie Moala, an insurance specialist from Enable Me who works with clients right across the country to build financial resilience, even in uncertain times. I started off by asking him what options are available in terms of insurance cover when it comes to losing your job.
Yeah, so there's very few limited options available in the market. So the one that comes to mind is probably redundancy cover. So there are only a couple of providers in New Zealand that actually offer redundancy cover. Off the back of COVID, insurers got really nervous about people losing their jobs, and a lot of them decided to remove themselves from that market.
Okay, so if you've got income protection insurance, that doesn't necessarily protect you from redundancy. That this is more like if you get injured or sick and it's beyond ACC. Is that right? Is that kind of where those gaps are?
That's correct. Yeah, income protection is purely there to provide an income if you're not able to work for any medical reason. Redundancy cover is its own separate cover that often comes as an add-on to income protection.
Okay, so and is redundancy quite expensive given that it's quite rare?
I think it's all relative. I think probably what's helpful for people to know is that redundancy cover in itself isn't all-encompassing. And what I mean by that is there's quite a short lifespan in terms of how long the benefit could pay you if you couldn't work. So redundancy typically can pay for up to a maximum of 6 months.
Okay.
Whereas the income protection can go for many years.
Because generally that's like a permanent injury or disability that's stopping you from working, rather than I've lost my job, because the expectation is, as an adult, you probably want to go find another job if you lose your job.
100%, but then also think about people potentially might be disincentivized if this redundancy covers paying while they're not working.
True that.
Potentially.
Yeah, fair enough. So what kind of waiting periods and exclusions or fine print should people be aware of if they do go and pick up this product? Obviously, like a 6-month term is kind of the maximum. Are there any other gotchas, like reasons for redundancy or anything like that?
Yeah, I think the biggest one to be mindful of is that when you apply for redundancy cover, you need to be in a position where you're not aware of any pending redundancies.
Yeah.
So the insurer will have a real challenging time with you if you apply for redundancy and the very next month, coincidentally, you're made redundant.
Oh, what are the chances?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
will the insurer talk to your ex-employer in that situation and go, why did this happen, to prove the reason for the redundancy? Or is that kind of not how it works?
Not necessarily. Look, I haven't had any personally, I haven't seen any situations where that's been the case.
Yeah.
These contracts are entered in by all parties in good faith. And so that is something that we make sure clients are aware of when they want to look into that is, hey, look, if you've got anything that you know of, we need to disclose that up front and let the insurer know, because otherwise it could hurt us at claim time.
I guess we've been talking about all of this from an employee perspective, but what kind of protection is there for someone who's self-employed or a contractor? Is there any income protection that still applies to them, both for, I guess, income protection or redundancy cover?
Yeah. So there are some products in the market that are specifically designed for people that are in small businesses, and they are tailored specifically to their needs. So one of the challenges for people who are new to business is that there aren't too many insurers that will want to offer them any sort of income protection. Redundancy is not an option when you're self-employed for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
But
You're fired. No, I like this job. Best boss I've ever had.
Yeah, exactly. But insurers aren't too keen on income protection for people who are brand new into being self-employed for a whole bunch of reasons. But there are specific products in the market designed specifically for that category of people. But yeah, as I say, there's nothing there for the redundancy side of things. It really is around the I'm unwell.
Yeah, right, okay. And best to talk to your insurance broker or your financial strategist or coach if you want to look into all these products, because there are a few different income protection products out there, and as you said, not as many redundancy cover products. But talk to an expert, see what's out there, see what you can afford.
100%. Yep. Get some advice. There are so many different variables, so many different types of income protections, and it's really hard to try and navigate that yourself. So get an expert opinion, get expert advice.
Yeah, cool. And for someone who has already lost their job and didn't have insurance, so ambulance at the bottom of the cliff, like there's not even an ambulance at that point, what should they do? Are there any other safety nets that they could rely on or they should know about that could help them through a bit of a rough patch in between jobs?
No, look, unfortunately, if you don't have any insurance and you're in that unfortunate situation where you have lost your job, then unfortunately the insurance isn't going to be able to, there's nothing really available that's going to be able to support you there from the insurance perspective.
Yeah.
You really need to have some form of insurance in place before that occurs. I think, particularly at this point in time, we're talking about people doing it tough and losing jobs and things like that. Probably a good thing to sort of bring to people's attention is around what happens if you've got insurance, you lose your job, and your initial reaction is, well, I've got to get rid of the insurance, because that's kind of like what happens.
Yeah, so that's a good point. So how can I continue to cover myself if I've lost my income? I might have income protection, but will that income protection insurance then cover all my insurance premiums, right? Like, because it's a cost that people want to cut straight away. If they've got reduced income, you want to start cutting back costs as quick as possible. And insurance seems like an easy one to cut.
100%, especially because you don't like the fact that you're paying for it.
Yeah.
It's an interesting thing because I don't think people cut back on their drinks on the weekends, their Sky spot, right?
Nope.
So the first thing that they look, so insurance is a really easy thing to pick on. I've got a couple of tips for the people listening. So the thing that we want to try and avoid at all costs is getting rid of the insurances or reducing it. That's kind of what we want to try and avoid at all costs.
Yeah.
So if you think about if your situation is tough financially now, just think about how much worse it's going to be if all of a sudden while you're off work, you now become sick, or it becomes a real catastrophe.
Yeah.
So so there's three things. The first thing is to weather the storm for as long as you can. If you can weather it for as long as possible and get through that, then you'll be far better off in the long run. Because if you make changes now, they may be really hard or impossible to reverse later when you come out of that financial situation. So deleting cover, reducing cover, really easy. You just need to sign a form and then it's done. Now, if you want to add all of those insurances back at a later date, quite hard. You've got to reapply, go through tests, prove your health, etc., etc.
And then your circumstances have changed. You might not have had the right amount of income for a certain time, so your premiums might cost you more.
Potentially. Yeah. So all of those things become an issue if you change your mind later and you want to reverse those decisions.
Yeah.
The second thing is what we were just talking about before. Check if there's any redundancy cover. So ask your provider. So in lieu of an advisor, go directly to your insurer and say, hey, does my insurance cover any redundancy cover? The third thing is find out, and again, in lieu of an advisor, talk to your insurer and understand if there's any options to temporarily suspend the cover. So can you put my policy on hold? It's not ideal because often if you have to put it on hold, it may mean that you're not covered at that particular point in time.
Sure.
But it's easy to put it on hold and then take it off hold as opposed to cancelling, reducing. And then as you're
similar to going on a mortgage holiday, like a repayments holiday in terms of, it might be 3 months of not paying your mortgage just to keep you afloat for a bit. It might cost you a little bit more in the long run, but at least that gave you a window to get your stuff sorted and you don't have to sell your house or go bankrupt, basically.
It's exactly like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And again, it's not ideal because you're really vulnerable at this time. If something happens while you don't have, this is kind of when you need it the most.
Yeah, totally.
And then the last, as a last resort, look, you may have to make some tough decisions. And again, this is where your advisor is going to be your person that you go to around, okay, if we have to make changes, what changes should we be making? Which ones are going to have the least impact on us if something goes really horrible today?
There's heaps to consider here. On the surface, it kind of felt like an episode about losing your job could have felt a bit doom and gloom, but I think there's a lot of super useful advice there. So if you do know someone who's found themselves unemployed recently, share this episode of the podcast with them. Maybe we can team up and help them find their next professional calling in life. A massive thank you to my guests today, Willie and Matt from Enable Me, Tim from Alexander James, and of course, the legend himself, Mike McRoberts. In the next episode, the new council valuations for Auckland homes are out, and it's a reminder that the property world is vastly confusing, stressful, and I hate it. So let's tackle it face on and figure out if I've just lost $400,000. But we'll do it together, yeah? In the meantime, don't forget to like, subscribe, watch our vids on Instagram at Where's My Money NZ, on YouTube, tell your mates to download it, tell your mum what a podcast is, and I'll see you next time where I'll once again be asking the question, where's my money?